So somebody said to me, we should really start on time. This isn't a wedding. It's not a Jewish wedding. So the truth of the matter is, it's not accurate. The truth of the matter is not accurate because it says, Chazal, the Meforshim say, commentaries explain that Pesach is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose the relationship between God and the Jewish people as metaphorically the relationship between a husband and a wife. And Pesach is the time that the Jewish people were chosen as the bride. Lech tech acharei bamidbar. He says, follow me into the desert. And the Jewish people are actually in the category of a bride of sorts. And then Shavuos is, the commentaries point out, the mountain was dangled over the head of the people. The Shavuos represents the chuppah. When the chassid and the kala get married, they have a chuppah afterwards. First they get engaged, which is Pesach. Then they go to the chuppah, which is Shavuos, and then Sukkot represents the home that they enter together. The bride and groom enter the home together. So we're really in the marriage right now. This is a marriage, so we had to start late. We had no choice, right? Just to fulfill the commentaries. This is all pre-planned. We had. I hope you believe that. It was all part of the part of the divine plan, because this ultimately is Sukkot is the marriage between HaKadosh Baruch Hu, metaphorically, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who chooses Klal Yisrael as the bride. So, one of the themes that we want to speak about tonight, there was a young boy, this just happened, just fresh off the press here in Israel, in one of the neighborhoods here in Israel. The little boy was being raised by a single parent, single mother. The boy was struggling a little bit with his Yiddishkeit, and eventually he straightened out. And about 14 years old, he's in yeshiva. And I'm from Chicago, it's yeshiva, as opposed to the rest of the world that says yeshiva. But the rest of the world is jealous of us Chicagoans. What can you do? We drink pop in yeshiva, on the roof. So this little boy was struggling in yeshiva. And his mother, then it straightened out, and he started doing better. And his mother noticed a few weeks before Rosh Hoshana, the boy brought weights into the house. He started lifting weights, started pumping iron in the house. His mother said to him, why are you doing that? So he said, because he read in a book, in a sefer, that there's a skula. A skula is what we would call, for lack of a better translation, a spiritual, auspiciously good luck charm, for lack of a better word. And he read there's a skula on Rosh Hoshana to, they sell the aliyahs in the shuls. They sell the various honors in the shuls. There's a certain skula to buy the Hagbah, which is when you pick up the Sefer Torah. So he wanted to buy the privilege of doing the Hagbah in the shul, so he was lifting weights to strengthen himself in order to be able to do Hagbah, 14-year-old boy. So the night before Rosh Hoshana, he calls the local Rav, the Rav of the shul, and he says to the Rav that he wants to go into the shul the night before Rosh Hashanah. He wants to practice doing Hagbah to see if he can get leverage on. It's not so easy. The Rav says okay, so he takes him into the shul, and the little boy goes and he does the Hagbah, and the Rav says to him, look, I watched you do it a couple of, your hands are shaking. And tomorrow you're going to be in front of the entire shul, so there's what we call Eimsa the Tzibura. You've got the nervousness because of the crowd of the shul that's there with you. I think you ought to let it go for a couple of years. I don't think you're ready for this. I don't think you should buy it this year. Okay, little boy's disappointed. He says, okay. The next day they go to shul, Rosh Hashanah, and they're selling the honors. So they get to the honor for Hagbah. So the Rav himself bought the honor for Hagbah. Then he called the boy up and he said, come here, you're going to do it in the shul. And he said afterwards, he said, listen, the boy's capable of doing it. It's not that difficult to do Hagbah. But why should he have to spend money on it? The boy wants the privilege of doing Hagbah. Let the boy do Hagbah. Beautiful story. So, there's a lesson, the message for us, which is one of the messages of Sukkot. That Sukkot is called the Chag of Aaron. Sukkot always corresponds to Aaron HaKohen. Aaron was the one that says, the Chazal say, that when the Jewish people, they had three precious gifts in the desert. They had the manna, which fell in the merit of Moshe Rabbeinu. They had the water, the well of Miriam, which is obviously called the well of Miriam because it was in the merit of Miriam. And they had the Ananei HaKavod, they had the clouds of glory. And the clouds of glory which is what we do Sukkot. That Sukkot is a commemoration of those clouds of glory that the Jewish people had in the desert. Those clouds of glory were there in the merit of Aaron HaKohen. And since they were there in the merit of Aaron HaKohen, when we do Sukkot, Sukkot is called the Chag of Aaron. It is the Chag that is associated more with more than anyone else. It's associated with Aaron HaKohen. Now, what's interesting about Aaron HaKohen is Aaron HaKohen had a younger brother. His younger brother was called Moshe Rabbeinu. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to Moshe Rabbeinu at a certain point, when Moshe Rabbeinu was in Midian, and he was out in the desert, and he goes to the burning bush, and he says, you're going to be the leader of the Jewish people. And Moshe Rabbeinu tries to back out of the responsibility and out of the honor of the position of being the leader of the Jewish people. What was his main concern? Moshe Rabbeinu's main concern is he's got an older brother, and his older brother is going to be it's very, very difficult. One of the most difficult things in life is to watch somebody else's success. When something good happens to somebody, it's very difficult for us to give a person, Rahman al-Islam, somebody goes through a difficult situation, somebody suffers a loss or somebody has a difficult situation, to comfort a mourner, we're willing to give the mourner our entire heart. We empathize with him totally. And part of the reason is because we don't want any of what that person has. We're willing to give him all of ourselves and he'll keep what he has. When it comes to success, it's very difficult for a person not to be jealous of somebody else's success. I once had a family member who called me up to share the good news that he won $1,800 in some sort of drawing. He shared the news, he didn't share the money. Right now, the best one. Now, I was just so happy for him. Right, I would have been happier had the phone call been in the opposite direction. If I would have called him, and I would have shared the good news with him, and I also wouldn't have shared the money with him. It's very difficult if somebody's successful in any way in life. It's very difficult. We're happy for the other guy. We want to be happy for the other person, but there's always a sense. There's always a feeling like I also want to be happy. So it could be any situation in life. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu is concerned. He's got an older brother. And Moshe Rabbeinu is now going to be the one who's receiving all the honor. He's the leader of Jewish people. And keep in mind that Aaron HaKohen, during the years that Moshe Rabbeinu was absent, and all those years that Moshe Rabbeinu was Yisro, who led the Jewish people in Egypt? The leader of the Jewish people, they had the Gadol Hador in Egypt at the time. The leader was Aaron. Aaron was the leader of the people during all those years until God came and contacted Moshe Rabbeinu at the burning bush and said, you're the one who's going to take him out. So Moshe Rabbeinu is nervous. My brother Aaron, I'm going to have the position, and he's older, and he's going to be jealous. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, the Pasuk says, you have nothing to worry about. Because Aaron is going to come out to greet you in the desert. V'racha v'samach belibo. He's going to see you, and he's going to rejoice in his heart. Aaron's going to be happy for you. Not 90% happy, not 99%, 100% happy for you in your position. And as a result of Aaron HaKohen being happy for Moshe Rabbeinu, rejoicing in Moshe Rabbeinu's success with 100% full heart, so Aaron then merits the choshen, the chest plate that the Kohen Gadol wore that goes over the heart. He becomes the Kohen Gadol. Why? Because we rejoice for Moshe Rabbeinu. And I want to point out something here, which is something that is often a misconception. The assumption is, we see Aaron HaKohen, everybody likes Aaron. What's not, he was the peacemaker, he made peace between husband and wife, and between people. Aaron was the Ohev Shalom, Rodev Shalom, just a wonderful person. Everybody likes Aaron. And so there's almost a feeling, he was just born good. In every family, there's always one who's like the gut and neshama, right, in the family. He's always one of the kids is always helping out the other kids. He's not selfish. So there's a sense that Aaron, he's just born good. It can't be that he was just born good. I'm sure he was good, but it can't be he was just born good. Because when God gives a reward is always proportional to the effort made in achieving whatever it is that a person needs to earns the reward. So if Aaron was happy for Moshe Rabbeinu and he gets the choshen, remember there's a man named Korach. Korach had everything. Korach was loaded, the richest Jew in history. You know that? Korach was the richest Jew in history. So he's probably happy most of the time. And Korach had the honor, he carried the Aron Kodesh. He had honor and he had wealth. There's one thing he wanted. He wanted to be the Kohen Gadol. He wanted to wear that chest plate. He gave up his life in this world and in eternity for the sake of wearing that chest plate. he gave everything up for the sake of wearing that choshen. So it tells you that the choshen is a big honor. If Aaron was given that as a reward, that means that Aaron had to work on himself in order to get his heart in that position. How do you get to that level? He had to work to be happy for the other person. You know as well as I do, it's difficult to rejoice in somebody else's success. What's the secret? So the Torah says, V'roacha v'samach b'libo. The secret is seeing the other person. Most of the time in life, we don't even see the other person. One of the most lame excuses that people use in life, sometimes people say, I'm really bad with names. I'm really bad with names. Ever use that excuse? Where you don't remember somebody, I'm really bad with names. You're not bad with names. I guarantee you're not bad with names. Because if I would tell you that somebody would walk in right now, and his name, I'll give you a name, and his name he happens to be a guy who's running a multi-million-dollar company, and he's looking for a partner at no investment, and I tell you that his name is Kaplalinski, I guarantee you're going to remember that name. Right? I guarantee you, first time. You know why? Because you were interested in hearing the name. Oh, what was the name? Yeah, see? And I'm not even making the offer and you remember the name. It's not even real and you remember it. You know why? Because it was important. So sometimes sometimes you're introduced to somebody and we're so concerned about ourselves, the reason you didn't hear the name because you never even heard the name to begin with. All you heard was, hi, this is Chaim, this is blah, 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 blah. That's all I heard was blah, blah, blah. Because all I'm thinking about is, but if I tell you that this is somebody who there's something in it for you, all of a sudden everybody, everybody remembers that name. Why? V'roacha v'samach b'libo. The secret in life is to see the other person. To rejoice for the other person means a recognition, it's not all about me. I'm not the only person on the planet. There are other people, and they have concerns. When an Aaron HaKohen sees the other person, v'roacha v'samach b'libo. He sees a Moshe Rabbeinu. You have to see the other person. So a rabbi who could do that with a kid, that means the rabbi's really like, hey, he's also a person. He needs something. V'roacha. The rabbi sees the boy. He sees what the boy needs. There was a Rav in Eretz Yisrael named Rabbi Avram Genachovsky. Now listen to this unbelievable story. Rabbi Avram Genachovsky was Rosh Yeshiva of the Chebin Yeshiva here in Eretz Yisrael. It's one of the Gedolim. And he learned 24 hours a day. He had a chavrusa on Friday night after the meal. Every Friday night, he had a study session with one of the Kolol fellows at his yeshiva. So one Friday night, this Kolol guy comes walking up to Rabbi Genachovsky's home, and absent-mindedly, he forgot that it was Shabbos, and he walks up to the door, and he rings the doorbell. On Shabbos, he rings the doorbell. And he waits, he's terribly embarrassed that he's waiting, and nothing happens. And he starts knocking, and he knocks. After 10 minutes, Rav Genachovsky is wearing his pajamas, bleary-eyed, comes over to the door, and he looks at the guy and says, He said, oi, I was so tired after the meal tonight, I forgot we had a chavrusa. I put on my pajamas, got into bed, I heard you knocking, the knocking woke me up, so, okay, just let me change and we'll sit down and we'll learn. So he went, he changed, and sat down, they had their learning session. After Rav Genachovsky was nifter, his family member said that's not what happened. He never forgot a chavrusa. He never went to sleep and forgot that he had a learning session on Friday night. Rav Genachovsky heard the bell ring. And he knew that if he would open the door when that bell rang, that this Kolol man would be so embarrassed that the Rosh Yeshiva saw that he desecrated Shabbos. So Rav Genachovsky, as soon as he heard the bell ring, he got into his pajamas and got into bed and he waited for the knocking. And he came back and he said to him, it was the knocking that woke me up, that he shouldn't feel it. That's v'roacha. You see the other person. How's he going to feel if I go over and I answer that door? They have, I don't know if any of you have ever been to a chasna in Israel. One of the difficulties at a chasna is that when you leave a wedding in Israel, they have families leave weddings. Transportation here is done. A lot of people don't have cars. Then you go to a wedding, and you have a husband and wife, 6 kids, and now you got to get home. Now what do you got to do? You got to go. You ruin your whole night waiting for the transportation, you're getting on public transportation, unless you're a person who enjoys, the crush of an egged bus. There's some people who enjoy that sort of thing. Some people bungee jump, some people enjoy egged buses. He teach his own, but most people don't. So this family walks out of the Gutnick wedding hall here in Israel, and father, mother, 6 kids, and it's like, okay, you're not going to walk over to the bus, and there's a guy with a van. And he says to them, where are you guys headed? They said, we're going to the remote neighborhood. He says, I'm going in that direction. So they get into the van with the guy, and the guy drives them, and he says, where do you live? He drops, I'm passing by your house. He drops them off right in front of his house. And then they see, as they're getting out, that he's starting to turn the van and move in a different direction, because not in the remote direction. So the father runs over to the window. He says, "1 second. You told us you're going in this direction." He says, "Yeah, I did. I went in this direction." He says, "Well, where are you going?" He says, "I'm going back to the wedding hall." He says, "So why did you take us home?" He says, "Listen, I know that people come to these weddings and their whole night could be ruined because of transportation. So I decided to do a chesed. Every evening I go and I park by the wedding hall. When families come out, I drive them, ask them where they're going. They ask me if I'm going in that direction. The answer is, yeah, I didn't tell a lie. I was going in that direction. See, here we are. I went in that direction." So, why? Because I understand what they're going through. A little bit to focus, a little bit to see the other people. There was a man in Bnei Brak. His wife was completely disabled, and he was wheeling her in a wheelchair. Listen to the story. He was wheeling her in a wheelchair somewhere in Bnei Brak. And a guy drives by, also in a van. He says, "Come on, get in, I'll give you a ride. I could fit the wheelchair in." He says, No, I'm going to wheel her. He says, "Where are you going?" He says, "We're going a certain distance. It'll probably take 15, 20 minutes to get there by foot." He says, "Come on, hop in, I'll give you a ride." He says, No, we're good." He said, "Why don't you want the ride?" He says, "I'll tell you." The guy said about his wife that when she first heard that she has this progressively debilitating disease, the one thing she was worried about more than anything else was that her family members would be ashamed to be seen with her in public once she's disabled. And the man said, "Listen, we don't want her to feel that we're ever ashamed of seeing her, that we're ashamed of being seen with her. Therefore, I would rather wheel her in public so she should feel and sense that we are not ashamed at all. Therefore, I'm going to decline the ride." That's the idea of v'racha v'samach b'libo, that a person is capable of seeing somebody else. Now, Sukkot, I told you, is the Chag of Aaron. So the reason it's called the Chag of Aaron, among other reasons, we said about the clouds of glory. Now, if you pay attention to the halacha of Sukkot, when you build a sukkah, theoretically you could build a sukkah with 3 walls. It's kosher with 3 walls. Most of us build 4 walls, but sukkahs could be built, a sukkah could be built with 3 walls. When, in the course of the year, each one of us is enclosed in our home. 4 walls in our home. Each person is involved in his own business, each person involved in himself, focusing on himself. Sukkot comes along, symbolically what we're doing is we're opening up that 4th plank. We're opening up that 4th direction, which means I am able to look out of my sukkah and see the other person. And the other person opens his sukkah and he's able to see me. Symbolically meaning, v'racha v'samach b'libo. Sukkot is the time where we look out and see other people. And one of the reasons, Aaron was the Ohev Shalom, the peacemaker. One of the things that creates, let's call it a certain amount of friction or tension, is economic class difference. People of different economic classes, people who are in certain different stratas, tend to gravitate towards each other. I still am waiting for that meeting with Warren Buffett. It hasn't happened yet. He hangs around with other people, right? He keeps trying to make an appointment. I don't have time for it. That's all. So at the end of the day, one of the class differences has to do based on economics, and since it has to do with economics, it often causes tension. We all leave our homes, which are permanent structures. You go out, we're all in the same boat now. No matter what your walls are made of, you've got a flimsy schach covering, so that if it rains, the rich people get wet too in the sukkah. They also got to go scampering in with their mattresses and their soup, which has gotten diluted because of the raindrops. A person who goes out to the sukkah, we're all the same boat here, because it's the Chag of Aaron, it's Shalom, Ufros Leinu Sukas Shlomecha, the sukkah of peace, Shalom. We're all the same economically right now. The same way we look out of that sukkah. I'll share you a beautiful thought, what comes from one of the Hasidic masters. I made a bracha before. There was the clouds of glory. Where do clouds come from? You studied in high school, right? Where do clouds come from? They got a vapor that rises and it condenses and it creates clouds. I think that's what the teacher said. I don't remember. So something like that, as long as it sounds good. As long as listen, I had a teacher in high school. I'll tell you a story. I had a teacher in high school who he didn't like us, and we didn't like him. He was an ex-Marine, a crude, coarse ex-Marine, and he didn't care for his job, and he didn't care for the people that he had to be involved with his job, which was us as sophomores in English class in high school. And he had two very annoying habits. Annoying habit number one is he would lecture us, and he'd point his glasses at us, right, as he lectured. It's very humiliating to have somebody pointing their glasses at you. The other problem, he had this habit that periodically he would repeat the last word of a sentence. Sentence. Because he felt that it made him look sophisticated. Sophisticated. So in a story which I couldn't make up if I wanted to, I got a pretty vivid imagination, I could not make this up if I wanted to. He was once handing back our test papers. He said to us, "Gentlemen, the trouble with your papers, there was too much repetition." Repetition, right? He actually said that. Of course, I was sitting in the front row, I almost bit my lip off trying not to laugh. And that was what I learned in English class that year. I learned a very important Mussar lesson that year. We always talk about doing chazara and you're studying, that you have to repeat what you learn over and over. That's the one thing that I learned in English class. So I remember learning something about clouds and condensation, and probably photosynthesis crawls into it somehow. I've never understood that. So clouds come from vapor which rises up. So one of the Hasidic masters says, you know, what do the clouds do for the Jewish people? The clouds of glory in the time of the desert, what did they do? They protected the Jewish people. They protected them from the spears and the arrows that the Egyptians were shooting. Aaron, the clouds are there in the merit of Aaron. Now listen to this. Where does the vapor come from that creates those clouds? When Jews are concerned about each other, when Jews see each other, when Jews are at peace with each other, when there's shalom among Jews, the way we speak to each other is different than when we're competing with each other, than when we're only concerned for ourselves. The vapor that comes out of the mouths of Jews who are concerned for each other, that's the vapor that rises up and creates the clouds of glory. Symbolically meaning that if we want protection, and gentlemen, we live in a world today where you know as well as I do, that the world today is so volatile. The world today is anywhere, it's a powder keg everywhere you look. There's fighting left, there's fighting east, there's everywhere that you look, the world looks like it's about to explode. It's so vulnerable. Everywhere you look, we need protection. We need protection. What's the protection for the Jewish people? The protection is the way we behave. That's the only protection. That becomes our clouds of glory. By al pi derech hateva, by natural law, we're in trouble. By natural law, we're surrounded by 60 or 80 million enemies, and it's only a miracle that they despise each other more than they despise us. Otherwise, we'd be in big trouble. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu protects us. If we are behaving the way we have to behave, we merit those clouds of glory, number one. Number two, the Gemara relates the following story. I'm going to tell you an amazing story. The Gemara talks about a man named Elazar ben Durdaya. Elazar ben Durdaya was a man who was involved he was knee-deep in immorality. And one time, this Elazar ben Durdaya, something happened. As soon as he was close to an act of immorality, something happened, and Elazar ben Durdaya took a Mussar lesson. He took it to heart. And he turns to the mountains and the valleys, and he turns to the heavens and the earth. He says, help me out. And the mountains respond, and the valleys respond, and the seas respond, and the constellations respond. We can't help you. And Elazar ben Durdaya says, Ein hadavar talui ela bi. It is dependent on me alone. And Elazar ben Durdaya puts his head between his knees, and he cries until his neshama leaves him. And a heavenly voice comes out and says, Rebbe Elazar ben Durdaya mizumin lechaye ha'olam haba. He has immediate entrance into the world to come. Do not pass go, do not collect 200. Straight up, mizumin lechaye ha'olam haba. Why? He became a Baal Tshuva in a moment. You have another man, by the way, there was a student in this yeshiva years ago, student in this yeshiva who told me, he came from what we call a religious background, and he had left the path of Judaism, and he was hanging out in a bar one night, And that was his life, basically. He was hanging around in bars and clubs. He was in some sort of club. And at a certain point, he just said to himself, you know, this is really stupid. And he decided the next day to fast. He put on tefillin for the first time in years the next day. Came to this yeshiva, became frum, then came to the yeshiva here. Today he's involved in Jewish outreach. In one moment, a person could turn his entire life around. So then you find, the Gemara says, there's a man named Acher, Elisha ben Avuya, who's one of the Tanoim. He's the Rebbe of Rabbi Meir, the great Rabbi Meir in the Gemara. He has a Rebbe, Elisha ben Avuya. And what do we call him? He's called, in the Gemara, he's referred to as Acher, the other one, because Acher went off the path. Why did Acher go off the path? Why didn't he also do tshuva the same way Elazar ben Dordaya did? And the answer is it's an attitude difference. Because Acher, the Gemara says, when his father at his bris wanted to devote him to Torah, he wanted his son to enter the world of Torah, it was with ulterior motivation. And his mother was once in a situation where she was pregnant, and she had a craving for a certain food, and it was life-threatening, so she ate a non-kosher food. And that affected his neshama in a certain way. You know what that really means? You know what that really means? Acher's got everybody to blame. It was my father's fault. It was my mother's fault. When Adam Arishon and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, why'd you do it? So what does Adam Arishon say? It was the woman, the wife. He blames the wife. Okay, I don't say it wasn't the wife's fault, but he blamed her. Instead of taking responsibility for himself, he blames her. What's the difference between them and Elazar ben Dordaya? Elazar ben Dordaya says, Ein adavar toloi ela bi. It's all about me. I have to take responsibility. We love blaming other people. Whatever our shortcomings are in life, we always love to point the finger and find somebody else who we could point the finger at. Ein adavar toloi ela bi. You know what Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's reaction was? He heard the heavenly voice. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi heard the heavenly voice that went out and called Elazar ben Dordaya, who was involved in a life of immorality, and the heavenly voice says, Rabbi Elazar ben Dordaya has immediate entrance to Olam Haba. So Rabbi Elazar Yehuda Hanasi started crying. He says, not only he became a Baal Tshuva, Yesh kone olamo b'shah achas. In one moment he acquires eternity, and not only that, he's got smicha too. He's called Rebbe. He's called Rebbe. Look what he could achieve in one moment. Rabbi Hanasi was crying. So everybody asks, you know, what was he crying about? Oh, we should be happy. He was accepted into Gan Eden, and he's a Baal Tshuva, and he's called Rebbe. What's he accepted, and what's he crying about? You know what he's crying about? He's crying because of if you could acquire your world, eternity in one moment. So what about all those moments that are squandered? What about all the moments that a person squanders? We have all these opportunities constantly. So I want to tell you something, gentlemen. You know what happens? Right now, do you know what we are? All of us in this base medrash, and not only all of us, all of Klal Yisrael. Do you know what our status is right now? What did we just finish? I don't mean Shabbos. I don't mean how much food we finished. Right? What did we just finish? Right? Elul, Rosh Hoshana, Yom Kippur. Do we believe in it? Do we believe in it? So we're all Baalei Tshuvas now. We're all fresh Baal Tshuvas. We're clean. Our slates are white clean. And then we go into a Sukkos. What's the connection? What are we doing with Sukkos after being freshly scrubbed? We came out new. We're clean. Clean as a whistle. And now we go into a Sukkos. You know what we're doing? Sukkos, did you notice the common denominator? You're in a sukkah with schach. And then we pick up those 4 species, which cost us far more than anyone in the world could possibly understand why we'd be paying that amount of money for fruit, which we can't even eat. When's the last time you ate a lulav? Right? When's the last time you tried eating an esrog? And we pay all that money. And hadassim, who ever heard of a myrtle branch? Right? I know Myrtle was a woman's name. I don't even know if I ever met a woman named Myrtle. Right? And now there's a myrtle branch. I only knew it's a name. And you got aravos, and you got the 4th, and you pay all that money for it. Try explaining that to somebody out there. Oh, how much was that esrog? Oh, cheap. It was only $80 for this piece of fruit. That's a cheap one, right? And then I got home and found a little black dot, so the whole thing doesn't count, right? Go explain that to somebody out there. What are we doing it for? And then we're in a sukkah. You know why? All of these things have one requirement in order to be able to make use of them. You know what that requirement is? They have to be things that have grown in nature. They were all living. You know what the message is for us? Surround ourselves in a sukkah with growth. Pick up a lulav and an esrog that was growing. And the reminder to us, we're all Baalei Tshuvas. What is this process of doing? Yom Kippur, we clap, right? A lot of clapping. Clap, clap, clap. And if a guy next to you needs some help, you clap on him too a little bit, That can only help. Or clap, clap, clap. And we became Baalei Tshuvas. What was the commitment that we made? The commitment wasn't just, oh, please forgive me, Hashem, I'll be good for now. Oh, you'll be good for now? What does it mean we'll be good from now on? Good from now on means I am committing myself to grow. That's the only thing God wants from us. Make a commitment of growth. So we go from Rosh Hashanah to a Yom Kippur into a sukkah so that we have a reminder that we're supposed to grow. I want to tell you a story in Chicago. There's somebody here who I met tonight who's also merited to be from Chicago, and I'm convinced that anyone who's not is jealous. Probably most people in America, I'm convinced that everybody in the world wants to be American, and all Americans want to be Chicagoans. This is just a theory that I have. It comes straight from Sinai. So in Chicago, there's a building project called Winston Towers. Some of you have heard of Winston Towers. This is a heavily, almost 100% populated by Jews. A few years back, there's a Jewish man, frum man, who decided to build a sukkah. So he goes in the parking lot and he starts to build this sukkah in the parking lot. And a lady comes out, Jewish lady, of course, comes out, and she says to him, "Oh, no. That we left back in Europe. You're not bringing in these old-fashioned, what do you call it? You're not going to bring these customs into America now. You're not building a sukkah in the parking lot." And she immediately calls the city authorities. Now, unlike the story that many of you have heard about a man who was once told to take his sukkah down, a man was also, the neighbors complained, and this man said, okay, he told the judge, I just need 8 days to take it, and the judge said, okay. This is unlike that story, which many of you have heard. This was, the man puts the sukkah up, and the lady calls the city, and the city, Chicago official, the city comes over, and they say, sorry, buddy, you can't build a structure, a hut, in the public parking lot. The guy says, okay. So he goes to a truck rental agency, and he rents a flatbed truck. And he parks this flatbed truck right in the parking lot, which is perfectly legal. And on the flatbed truck, he then built a sukkah, right opposite her window, I think, right? And he builds a sukkah right in this flatbed, that's perfectly legal. Do anything you want on a flatbed truck, right? He builds it right there, right. What's bothering them? What's bothering this lady, really? What's her objection to somebody building a sukkah in her parking lot? So I think that there are two ideas here. Idea number one is always that anytime an Orthodox Jew practices his Judaism, the person who's not as committed, his conscience is bothering him. An interesting phenomenon, when I was in high school, I was in a yeshiva high school, so we had secular studies in the afternoon. Almost every non-Jewish teacher to a man, almost every one of them, when he came to teach us, he put a yarmulke on his head. And almost every Jewish teacher did not. The secular Jewish teachers did not. You know why that is? Because the non-Jew isn't threatened by it. The non-Jew comes in and says, big deal. They want me to put on a cap, I'll put on a cap. Take it off. It means nothing to me. The secular Jew comes in and says, listen, you're not going to tell me how to be a Jew. He's very threatened by this. He's got to make a point. And his point is, I'm not going to wear this thing. Interesting. This lady comes out, you're not putting out that sukkah is her conscience. But I think it's something much deeper. You see, a sukkah is what we call a binyan arai, a temporary structure. And the 7 days of Sukkot, the 7 days of Pesach, the commentaries say correspond to the 7 decades of the average lifetime. You ever hear that? There's 7 decades, the average lifetime. We say a pasuk, Yemesh noseinu b'hem shivim shana, we live 70 years. V'im bigvuros shmonim shana. And if we really go long, we go to 80. Statistically, they have found that women outlive men by a little bit. Why that is, we're not sure. but women go to about 77, men go to about 73. They've also found that married men live longer than single men, but that married men are more willing to give up their lives. So they're statistically, the 7 days of Sukkot, it's a binyan arai. Sukkot is a temporary structure. I think that's what she's bothered by. You see, because we all know that this world is temporary. But if you're living for this world, it becomes a very annoying reminder. It's something that bothers a person. A person who's living for this world. So seeing a temporary structure is a reminder that it's all temporary. Everything they're living for is temporary. Whereas the person who's not living, who's using this world, because he understands that this world is a means of establishing a station for eternity for his neshama, then a person doesn't see that sukkah is something that, to the contrary. The sukkah is the reminder that a person is meant to grow. We see the sukkah as something very optimistic. It's something that helps us to actualize the commitment which we've made on a Rosh Hashanah and a Yom Kippur, which have just elapsed. So we go into that temporary structure, and that temporary structure is a reminder for us. We live in a funny world. I don't mean funny, ha-ha. But it is a funny world. So you have a world where the values have deteriorated, the values around us, I can't even say the values have deteriorated because there are no values. Well, check that. On the West Coast, you're not allowed to use straws. Right? Straws are a threat to the what do you call it? To the ecology. That's the biggest problem they have on the West Coast is straws. You see, on the West Coast, now the fact that there are drugs and there are all sorts of people that cannot be identified exactly what gender they are, that's not a problem. But straws, plastic straws, now we're in trouble. Now we're in trouble. And on the East Coast, they have a law that, they want to limit the amount of soda that you can put in a bottle, the size of the soda bottles, because that's the biggest issue that they have. The fact that there's rampant crime has, that's minor stuff. But a soda bottle, pop, a sugary drink, and look out. And could you imagine if you combine the two? My goodness, you put a straw in a soda bottle. I mean, they could probably they'll bring back capital punishment for that. Because that's the biggest problem they have. This is the world we look at. It's an olam hafuch reisi. It's an upside down world. Instead of dealing with the issues, and then a Torah Jew comes along and Torah Jew says, "Hey, listen, this whole thing doesn't make sense. I have a purpose. I have a goal. What's my goal? I have one goal in life. My goal is to grow." That's what Sukkot does for us. Sukkot comes along, and Sukkot is a reminder. So there's a pasuk, and the pasuk says in Parshas Eikev, "Ve'ata Yisrael," and now Jewish people. What does Hashem ask for us? Only to fear God. Ve'ata Yisrael. And the Medrash says that this word ve'ata is a reminder to do tshuva. It's a reminder to do tshuva. We have to repent. The word ve'ata. And now Jewish people, you have to fear God. That's a reminder to do tshuva. So I saw one of the commentators, Rabbi Yankel Galinsky, he says, it doesn't say anything in the pasuk about doing tshuva. The pasuk says, and now Jewish people, what do I ask that you should fear God and walk in God's way. It doesn't say a word about repentance. It doesn't say a word about doing tshuva. Ve'ata Yisrael. And now Jewish people. What's that got to do with tshuva? How does the Medrash derive from here a reminder to do tshuva? You know what the answer is? The answer is ve'ata, now, right now. Right now, the commitment that we've made in an Elul, in a Rosh Hashanah, in a Yom Kippur, and we go into a Sukkot, and we're singing, and we're dancing, and we're celebrating the entire Sukkot. What are we celebrating? We're celebrating that commitment. We're celebrating that ve'ata, and now. Not to put it off to later, and not to wait for a later opportunity. Ve'ata, all of those things that we've committed ourselves to on a Rosh Hashanah, on a Yom Kippur. Ve'ata, right now, we're fresh, we're clean, we're Bali Tshuvas, every one of us. And therefore, ve'ata, we take the initiative now, we grab the reminder of the Sukkot. Take the 4 species, take the schach, one word. With this I conclude. I had a Rabbi here in the yeshiva at Or Sameach. great Talmud Chacham. I was once leafing through his notebook. I was a student at the time. I was leafing, he had a loose leaf notebook. Many of you have never even seen a loose leaf notebook, right? Back in the old days, those of us who were from the prehistoric age, we used to have loose leaf notebooks. We have something called a pen. There's actually a telephone that was attached to a wall. Could you believe it? And so he had a loose leaf notebook. And in this loose leaf notebook, I was looking through, he had commentaries on one of the greatest commentaries, Rabbi Akiva Eger, and I'm leafing through. And in the back of his notebook, he had a picture of a California redwood, a sequoia tree. Somebody had taken a picture lying on their back with an angle pointing upwards. And I said to him, what's this doing in your notebook? I'd expect to see it in a girl's notebook. Picture of a tree. And it's a picture of this 300-foot tree from the ground upwards. And I looked at it, I said, what's this doing in your notebook? He said to me, it's a reminder. I have to always grow. That's what Sukkot is about. 4 species, schach, ve'ata, and now we grow. Yeah, good morning.